Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into something pretty wild. You ready for this?
Hit me with it.
It's all about this fan-made thing they're calling Glicked. Get this, it's all about finding those hidden links, you know, between Wicked and Gladiator 2.
Wicked and Gladiator 2? Really?
They're two totally different movies, right? But stick with me here. We're going to dig into this recent conversation between Ariana Grande and Paul Mescal. Glinda the Good Witch meets Lucius the Gladiator.
Yeah.
I know, it sounds crazy.
It's definitely a unique pairing. I'm curious to see where this goes.
Me too. It gets really interesting, trust me. Especially when they start talking about stepping into those roles, all those pressures and anxieties.
I can only imagine. These are iconic characters, beloved by millions. The weight of expectation must be immense.
Right, like you'd think Ariana Grande would just waltz into playing Glinda no problem. But she actually chased this role for years.
Yeah.
Years. Even asking to, turn off the AC on the set of The Voice to save her voice for an opera audition the next day. Can you believe that?
Wow, that's dedication. Talk about feeling the pressure. It speaks volumes about the expectations surrounding Wicked, not just from the fans, but from Grande herself.
Totally.
Yeah.
And she talks about those auditions. 3.5 months, just constant singing, vocal training, the whole 9 yards. Like a boot camp for Glinda.
Sounds intense.
Oh, it was. But then you have Mescal's journey to Gladiator 2. Completely different story. No crazy auditions, no vocal warm-ups. Ridley Scott basically saw him in Normal People and was like, bam, that's my Lucius.
Just like that, straight from a drama to a historical epic. That's a heck of a leap.
No kidding. And next thing you know, he's holding one of the actual swords from the original Gladiator film.
Yeah.
Talk about pressure. But here's the thing. Their anxieties are totally different. Grande is dealing with external stuff, the legacy of Glinda, those fans, that massive production.
While Mescal seems more concerned with, how do I put this, internal doubts, I guess. How will his performance measure up, especially coming from roles that are so, I don't know, internalized?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like he's worried about staying true to himself while also stepping into this larger-than-life character. He even, avoided watching the original Gladiator. Can you believe that? Just to keep his vision pure.
Wow, that's interesting. It's like two completely different approaches to tackling those anxieties. It makes you think about how we deal with pressure in our own lives. Some of us focus on the external factors, the expectations, the sheer scale of the task.
While others, we get caught up in those internal doubts, those whispers of self-doubt.
Exactly. But somehow, they both manage to channel those anxieties, those fears, and bring these fantastical characters to life.
And that's where it gets really interesting, right?
Yeah.
How do you find that truth, that humanity in characters that could so easily become caricatures? I mean, a bubbly good witch, a vengeful gladiator, how do you make them real?
Right. It's a delicate balance.
Well, Grande talks about working with her acting coach. She calls her like a healer, someone who helped her confront her own, quote, monsters.
Confront her monsters, huh? That's powerful imagery.
Isn't it? It's like she had to dig deep, past the glitter and the pink dresses, to find the heart of Glinda.
Fascinating. And Mescal, what was his approach?
Well, he talks about bringing his words, skill set to the role. Like he wasn't trying to become someone else, just bringing his own truth to Lucius and letting that shine through.
It's almost like he's saying, this is me, this is what I bring to the table, and I'm going to use that to make this character my own.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, are those approaches really that different? Or are they just two sides of the same coin?
That's a great question. It highlights this idea that finding truth, especially in fantasy, might require both. That external preparation and the internal exploration, a bit of technique, a dash of instinct, all mixed together. What do you think?
I think you're onto something. It's like we all have our own ways of facing those challenges, those pressures, those expectations that life throws at us.
And seeing those approaches reflected in the stories we love, whether it's a whimsical musical or an epic gladiator film, it helps us understand ourselves a little better.
It's like we're looking for those reflections, those echoes of our own struggles and triumphs in the characters we connect with.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the directors. I mean, their styles seem to mirror this whole contrast between, external structure and internal freedom. Grande describes John M. Chu as this meticulous planner, storyboards, shot lists, very precise vision.
And then you have Mescal talking about Ridley Scott, almost like he's got this psychic ability to make decisions on the fly, just feeling the energy of the scene.
Wow. So it's like Scott is trusting his gut, the flow of the moment, while Chu has a more structured, almost architectural approach to filmmaking.
It's wild, right? These two completely different approaches. But here's the kicker. They both encourage improvisation.
Really? That's fascinating. Freedom within structure, huh? It seems like that's crucial to both films.
Absolutely. Like, think about that moment in Popular Grande's big belly laugh. Totally improvised, right?
Yeah.
Became iconic. And then there's that forehead kiss Mescal added in Gladiator 2, which sadly got cut. Grande was even teasing him about it in the interview.
Oh, that's too bad. But it just goes to show that those spontaneous moments, those bursts of creativity, they can really elevate a performance.
And it speaks to the collaborative nature of filmmaking, right? It's not just about the director's vision or the actor's interpretation. It's about that spark that happens when creative minds collide.
It's like a chemical reaction, a fusion of ideas and energies, creating something truly unique.
Exactly. And you know what? Let's shift gears for a second and talk about what happens when those films finally meet the world. You know, they're out there facing the public, the critics, the fans. How do these actors deal with all that?
Right, because it's one thing to create in a bubble, but then you've got to face the, what did Mescal call it, the noise of public opinion. Especially in the age of social media, it can be overwhelming.
Totally. And Mescal is really honest about how uncomfortable he is with all that publicity stuff. Not on social media. Feels like his mind is, quote, full of spiders during the press tour. Can you imagine?
Oof, that sounds rough. So different from Grande, who's basically grown up in the spotlight.
Right. She seems much more at ease with the whole fame thing.
Yeah.
But even she talks about the emotional impact of watching her own performance, especially that Oz dust scene. Like, it brings back all those raw, vulnerable feelings every time.
Wow. So while Mescal's over here analyzing his performance, picking it apart, trying to understand how it all works, Grande is fully immersed in the emotional experience, even off screen.
It's like she's still living the character's journey.
Two different approaches, yet both incredibly valid. It reminds us that there's no one right way to be an artist, to process your work, to cope with the vulnerability of putting yourself out there.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to the core of this whole Glicked thing. We're not just comparing two movies, we're exploring those artistic choices, those behind-the-scenes moments, and those surprising connections that make this mashup so fascinating.
And there's so much more to uncover.
Exactly. So stick with us as we dive even deeper into the world of Glicked in the next part of our deep dive.
Ooh.
Okay, so we're back. And I'm, like, dying to hear more about those holy shit moments both Grande and Mescal talked about. I mean, stepping onto these massive sets, surrounded by all that talent and detail.
Right. Talk about inspiration.
I know.
Must be incredible.
And Grande, like, she talks about working with Cynthia Erivo like she's in awe. Calls her a once-in-a-lifetime talent, in many lifetimes. I mean, even she admits to being like a total fangirl, you know, watching bootlegs of The Color Purple and feeling just overwhelmed with gratitude to be sharing the screen with her.
I can totally relate to that. Like seeing your favorite band live and then getting to jam with them backstage.
Yeah.
Mind-blowing, right?
Totally, and it shows how important that creative energy is, you know, that back and forth. Grande and Erivo, their dynamic, it seems like it just pushed them both further.
Yeah, feeding off each other. Meanwhile, over on the Gladiator 2 set, Mescal talks about how Denzel Washington was like this moral compass.
Yeah, someone he could lean on, especially since this was his first, you know, huge production.
So both actors found support in their co-stars, but in different ways.
Right. Grande seems to be drawing inspiration from, like, Erivo's raw talent.
Yeah.
And Mescal's looking for guidance from Washington's experience. Like, they each had a mentor, you know, helping them navigate all of it.
Makes sense, especially when you think about how huge some of those scenes were.
Oh, yeah. Grande talks about filming that Oz dust scene, 10-minute single take, 500 lighting cues. It's like cinematic choreography on a whole other level.
Wow. And she describes that you can practically feel the energy, all those dancers, the actors, everyone's silent, just holding space for Erivo's performance. Must have been electrifying.
I bet. And then there's Mescal walking out of the Coliseum onto that Via Appia. It's this meticulously constructed 600-meter road they built, leading to the Emperor's Palace.
Can you imagine, like, stepping back in time?
I know, right?
Yeah.
Ancient Rome coming to life.
Pretty amazing how both directors, Chu and Scott, you know, they created these huge, detailed worlds, but still managed to keep that focus on the actors' performances. It's a tricky balance, you know, grandeur and intimacy.
For sure. Oh, and speaking of details, we got to talk about those costumes.
Oh, yes. Iconic looks in both films.
I mean, they're almost as memorable as the characters themselves.
Right. And Grande, she goes into so much detail about Glinda's bubble dress. 16 layers, snapped onto a corset, designed to feel, you know, light and airy, reflecting her magic.
And she said even her school shirt has like laser cut bubbles underneath. You can't even see them, but it's another layer to the character.
Wow. It's those details that really pull you in. You might not even notice them consciously, but they add to that whole sense of, being there in that world.
Totally. And then Mescal, he talks about how putting on Lucius's costumes just transformed him. Took him, quote, miles away from anything I've ever done. He even had to deal with some dodgy wig fittings.
No.
Yeah, he realized his head's not really made for wigs, but he just went for it, embrace the imperfections.
That's so cool, just being present in the moment, letting go of expectations.
I love that.
Yeah.
And that actually brings us to something interesting.
Yeah.
Because they have really different acting styles. Like Mescal kept a journal during filming.
A journal? Really?
Yep, writing down the feeling of each scene so he can compare it later to the final product.
That's so methodical.
Super analytical, but so different from Grande. She admits to like avoiding watching herself on screen whenever possible, and especially that Ozdust scene. It brings back all those raw emotions. It's like too intense to revisit.
Makes sense, like she's fully embodying the character, even off-screen.
It's fascinating. Mescal, the analyzer, breaking it all down, trying to figure out the magic, and Grande, the feeler, letting those emotions take over.
It makes you wonder, are those approaches incompatible? Or are they just, different ways of expressing the same artistic impulse, the desire to connect with the character, to bring them to life?
Right. Maybe the real magic is somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Head and heart, feeling and analyzing.
That's what makes Glicked so interesting. Challenges us to think outside those boxes, to see how those different approaches can, work together.
Totally, like those yin and yang symbols.
Yeah.
Seemingly opposites, but together they create a whole.
Exactly. And speaking of challenges, let's get back to that whole audience reaction thing. How do these actors deal with that pressure? We already talked about Mescal being, not loving social media. But what about Grande? She's been in the spotlight forever. How does she handle it?
Well, she doesn't shy away from the tough stuff. She admits it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
But she emphasizes finding those moments of peace, like connecting with her co-star, her director, finding those genuine moments amidst all that craziness.
Well, it's about focusing on those real connections, those anchors.
Yeah, the stuff that keeps you grounded.
And it's a good reminder that even for experienced performers, putting your work out there, facing that judgment, it can be really tough.
It's got to be nerve-wracking. And it's cool to see how both actors, even though they come from such different backgrounds, they both find joy in that shared experience with the audience.
Makes sense. That connection is everything.
Yeah. Grande talks about loving hearing the audience react to certain scenes. And Mescal tells a story about sitting next to Ridley Scott at the premiere, getting elbowed every time Scott loved something.
Uh-huh. That's awesome.
I know, right? It's those reactions that transform a film from, personal project into something everyone can experience.
It's like that feeling when you're at a concert and everyone's singing along.
I love that. It's collective energy, a shared experience. And that's what makes movies so powerful. They bring us together, create those moments of connection that we all crave.
And both Grande and Mescal seem to really get that, especially thinking about, what's happening in the film industry right now.
Oh, yeah. Things have been rough.
Mescal talks about all the challenges the past few years and how, films like Barbie and Oppenheimer, their success, it's like reigniting that passion for going to the theater.
It's like people are rediscovering that magic, that shared experience.
For sure. And Grande even said she was, quote, so excited watching the Barbenheimer numbers go up because it meant people were, falling in love with movies again.
It's awesome to hear them so enthusiastic about the future of cinema. It makes their whole conversation even more, more meaningful.
They're not just talking about themselves, they're reflecting on the power of storytelling, how it connects us all.
So before we move on, let's recap. We've talked about how Grande and Mescal found support from their co-stars, those incredible moments on set that show both the grandeur and the intimacy of those films, and how they approach embodying their characters, in very different but equally effective ways.
We also touched on how tough it can be to put your work out there, and those different ways they cope with that vulnerability. But in the end, both Grande and Mescal find joy in that shared experience of cinema. That connection between the artist and the audience.
Yeah, it's something special.
And in the last part of our deep dive, we're going to get to the heart of Glicked, those surprising connections that tie these films together. We'll explore how Wicked and Gladiator 2, even though they're so different, they both deal with these big questions about power, corruption, and the fight for justice.
That'd be good.
We'll also leave you with some food for thought, some questions about how those themes resonate with our own lives, and the choices we make when things get tough.
All right, so we've talked about the actors, those behind-the-scenes moments, their creative processes. But let's get back to this whole Glicked thing. It's not just about putting two movies together,
Oh, right.
There's got to be something deeper going on here.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that these connections, they didn't come from, like, some marketing team or a studio exec, you know?
Right.
They came from the fans.
The fans saw something deeper.
Exactly. Like, they're saying, hey, look a little closer. There's more to Wicked and Gladiator Thicken than you think.
They're making us think about these stories in a whole new way.
And remember, Ariana Grande herself talked about these parallels, the battle between good and evil, those corrupt authority figures. It's not just about witches and gladiators.
Right, it's about those bigger themes, those things that go beyond the story itself.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, like, what does it mean to be good or evil? Are those things set in stone? Or does it depend on, your perspective of the situation?
That's a good question.
And what about corruption? Is it just about what individuals do? Or can it be part of, like, the system itself, institutions, even traditions?
Ooh, getting deep here. But both movies deal with those questions, right?
Yeah. Think about Wicked. Glinda, the good witch, she starts to question the wizard, the whole foundation of Oz. And Elphaba, the so-called wicked witch, she becomes a symbol of rebellion.
Right, fighting against a corrupt system.
Yeah. And in Gladiator 2, Lucius is dealing with something similar. He's trying to live up to his father's legacy, fighting for what's right in this Roman Empire that's, well, pretty messed up.
Full of power struggles, corruption.
Yeah, he's going up against a system that's lost its way.
So both movies are making us think about those easy categories we use.
Yeah.
Good, evil, right, wrong. They're saying it's more complicated than that.
Exactly. And that's where this whole Glicked idea gets really interesting. It's not about simplifying things. It's about expanding our understanding, recognizing that those themes, they show up in different ways, in different contexts.
Right. But they're all part of the human experience.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, like, would Glinda and Lucius, even though they're from totally different worlds, would they understand each other, see those similarities in their struggles?
Or they even like each other. I don't know, Glinda might be a little too peppy for Lucius.
Yeah, maybe. But I think deep down, they'd both get it. They both want to do what's right. They're not afraid to challenge things.
And what about Elphaba and Lucius? Can you imagine? Two rebels defying expectations, fighting for justice.
That's a team up I'd love to see.
Right. This whole Glicked thing, it's like it's giving us permission to play with those possibilities, to imagine these characters meeting, to see those unexpected connections.
And to think about what those connections mean.
Exactly. It's about asking those what-if questions, those thoughts that stay with you long after the movie's over.
And that's what we're trying to do here on the Deep Dive, right? It's not just about telling you about the movie or what the actors did. We want you to engage with these ideas, to come to your own conclusions.
Make it personal.
Right. Connect it to your own life, the world around you.
So as we wrap up this Glicked deep dive, think about those themes: power, corruption, justice. Where do you see them playing out in your own life? Are there systems you want to challenge? Are there moments where you need to be a little more like Lucius? Stand up for what you believe in.
And remember, you don't need a sword or magic to make a difference. Sometimes those small acts of courage, of kindness, those are the things that matter most.
So channel your inner Glinda, your inner Lucius, and go out there and make a difference, one step at a time. That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. We'll be back soon with a deep dive into something completely new. Until then, keep those brains buzzing.